us. My name is Morhaf Al-Ashkar. I am Associate Professor here at the University of Washington. And we have Project Radical team here on the panel today. Thank you again for joining. We're waiting for a couple other panelists and then we'll start shortly. For those who just joined, thank you very much and good afternoon. My name is Morhaf Al-Ashkar. I'm Associate Professor at the University of Washington. We are waiting for a couple other panelists and then we'll start shortly. Okay. I think we should get started. Welcome everyone. My name is Morhaf Al-Ashkar. I am family physician, associate professor, and lung cancer survivor. I want to welcome you to our webinar, Project Radical, that aims to raise awareness about racial health disparity as it affects Black communities in regards to lung cancer. We have six sessions during the month of November, Monday and Thursday, the first 3 weeks. We hope you'll be able to join us. Start with some housekeeping. Please keep your microphone mute until if you want to ask a question in the Q&A session in the last 15 minutes, then please raise your hand and unmute. We have the panelists we have with us. We'll start with introduction and then have a brief discussion on the work that we're doing and introducing Project Radical to you and some about the next steps. So I would like to give the floor to my friends, my colleagues, my teammates here with Project Radical. And let's start with Maisha Standifer. I want to ask everyone, take 2 or 3 minutes, share your name, your role outside of Project Radical, how you got connected to Project Radical, and your work on disparity. So, Maisha can start. And if it's okay with everyone, we'll go with first name. And of course, the title of respect is always reserved.
Good evening, everyone. I am Maisha Standifer. My professional gig, I say, is that I am the Health Policy Director at the Satcher Health Leadership Institute at Morehouse School of Medicine. I am a community-based participatory researcher, cancer disparities researcher, and just a community advocate in general, particularly focusing on health disparities and trying to strive to achieve health equity. And I am so elated to be a part of Project Radical because personally, I was a caregiver to my spouse, Emmanuel Standifer, for lung cancer. And he was diagnosed in March of 2020 and passed in April of 2021. And so not only as a caregiver, but an advocate personally, along with a personal dedication and more so of a commitment and a charge that I have in terms of continuing to develop, promote, and initiate research, preparing the most affected and impacted community, the African American community, and also African American males, and educating them about screening and also just awareness out there. So I am again excited to be a part of this group, and I came about in connection with Chris Draft and Morehouse, and again, glad to be here.
Thank you, Maisha. Thank you for the friendship. Thank you for being here. Chris, would you like to go next?
Well, I'm Chris Draft, former NFL linebacker and lung cancer advocate. And like I tell so many people, and I was visiting a few places a day here in Boston, Massachusetts. So I'm not at home, but I'm in Boston. I started out earlier at a hospital that's a part of the Cambridge Health Alliance, and they received a lung cancer health grant from the NFL as a part of the Crucial Catch initiative with American Cancer Society. So was there also at some firehouses as we're celebrating the initiative that they have with Mass General in terms of lung health. But I'm saying that I was there, but I wouldn't be there if my wife, Keisha, wasn't diagnosed with lung cancer in December of 2010. And unfortunately passed a year later in December of 2011. Before she passed, we were able to get married, and on that day, we made a commitment to each other and also to the lung cancer community. That commitment has lived past her in our ability to change the face of lung cancer, which is what the commitment has been of our Team Draft Initiative and the Chris Draft Family Foundation. And that what is changing the face of lung cancer? That's been making sure that the message is not just about getting people to stop smoking. We know that is very critical, but it's not the full story as it relates to lung cancer. So it's important that we acknowledge it, but also acknowledge other risk factors, and then make sure that we understand that early detection, treatment, research, and survivorship matter. And so as we're here talking about the Black community specifically, some of the issues with lung cancer are so much greater than just the cancer disparities of the Black community, but they make it where it's worse. And so hopefully with this conversation, we will be able to acknowledge that the Black community in too many cases is left out. But also at the same time, recognize that lung cancer as a whole have not accepted the fact that survivorship has to be the goal, regardless of your color, regardless of where you live, regardless of who you are. So thank you for allowing me to be here and be a part of this.
Thank you, Chris, for being with us. Eugene, would you like to go next?
Good evening, everybody. I'm very happy and honored to be here. My name is Eugene Manley Jr., and my day job is Director of Scientific Programs at the Lung Cancer Research Foundation. And I have this long, convoluted story, but the short version is I grew up in Detroit and didn't see really many people doing STEM or science at all. And I ended up going through and getting my PhD, and I focused in lung cancer. And then later on, I did training in breast cancer. So I've done a lot of work with combination therapies, immunotherapies, tumor microenvironment. And then I transitioned over to nonprofit roles, doing relationship building, alliance building. And now I'm overseeing lung cancer grant programs. And through actually running grant review this year, Morhoff actually did some disparities reviews for me. So this is sort of how I got introduced into Project Radical. So if I didn't reach out to him to get grants, I probably would not have been aware of this project. But I think it's a really great project. And one of my biggest goals is to really advocate for more awareness for minority communities, access, treatment, equity in clinical trials, and trying to get more minorities in STEM, and not just in, but retained and advanced. And that's my little spiel.
Thank you, Eugene, for all the work that you're doing. Dante?
All right, well, hello. My name is Dante Moorhead, and my day job is I'm a community health educator, and I'm with the Fred Hutch office and University of Washington Cancer Consortium. And I work with the Office of Community Outreach and Engagement here. And my work specifically is in cancer health disparities for African American, African descent communities here in Washington. And so my focus is addressing health inequities and looking at cancer prevention, education, awareness, and I do community-based participatory research as well. And so lung cancer disparities are an issue among communities of color. And Dr. Morhoff does much of the same work, and we have been able to connect through the University of Washington, and our office was happy to support his great work. And he was gracious also enough to also collaborate with our office earlier this year on a symposium this year that focuses on addressing health inequities and issues. And we both collaborated with communities and have gotten to become a part of this advisory board. And we have been able to serve the community together. And so I'm excited to be here and be part of this group and work with these amazing people to do just that and to bring awareness and to some attention to lung cancer disparities, especially among the African American, African descent communities.
Thank you, Dante. Nick?
Yeah, hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Nick Ferris. I serve as the director of the lung cancer program at the Baptist Cancer Center here in Memphis, Tennessee. So that's what I do during the day is oversee clinical operations for individuals who've been diagnosed with lung cancer. Our healthcare system as a whole provides services for West Tennessee, East Arkansas, and most of the state of Mississippi, which if you look at the top 5 leaderboards no one wants to be at the top at for lung cancer incidence and lung cancer mortality, it's West Virginia, Kentucky, and then those 3 states, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee. So our passion in providing care for our community as a community-based healthcare organization is, essentially that for too long, scientific discovery, scientific advancement, research, advances in treatment, resources have all come from outside, and typically where we practice is one of the last places to get the benefit of that. And we feel like because our community suffers so much from lung cancer that we should be at the forefront of leading change. And that we should be a part of the conversations, that when we talk about disparities, that we don't ignore it, we don't pretend it's not there, we address it directly. So everything that we do here in the part of the country that we call the Mid-South is to make sure that what we build is available and to the benefit of all people. So 60% of our population are white, 40% are Black. If we build something that benefits only 60% of the population, then we've failed. So our goal is to be a part of whatever we can to make sure that every person with lung cancer receives the care that they deserve.
Thank you, Nick. Matthew?
Thanks, Morhoff. And my name's Matthew Thompson. So I'm a professor here at the University of Washington Department of Family Medicine, same department as Morhoff. And it's a real honor to be part of this group. Just hearing people's backgrounds and stories again, it's just always very inspiring. So I'm a researcher, and my research involves how to detect individuals with lung cancer earlier. And one of the big maybe elephants in the room with lung cancer is that the vast majority of people with lung cancer are not diagnosed through screening. They're diagnosed after they develop symptoms or changes, end up in some clinic or ER. That's when they're diagnosed. So finding what are those symptoms and how do people experience them, and how can we try and shift this disease from presenting so late to presenting earlier at a stage where it's treatable. That's my research. So really pleased to be part of this group and to be learning a lot from all of you. Thanks, Maura.
Thank you, Matthew. And I can share some about my story as well. I'm at the Department of Family Medicine with Matthew, and family practice, family doctor, also researcher. In 2016, I developed lung cancer, stage 4, and this November actually marks 5 years since my cancer diagnosis. And I ask myself, why do I survive and others don't? And many others do not survive. When that question comes to people, and I understand that the answers comes to revolve around a mission or a goal or a life project, which I think should be the way everybody answers that question at any time. Why am I alive? Well, because there's something for me that I'm working on and I need to continue to work on. But when I ask myself that question, why am I surviving, others are not? Well, big part of that has to do with disparities. Some people are not accessing what people like me who have privilege, who have access to resources, are getting. And this is a problem. This is morally damaging. This is difficult to actually bear. The more I live, and I speak sometimes like an 80-year-old person, but the more I live with cancer, this is my 5th year, the more difficult it gets to notice and observe and see those injustices around, and not feel like you want to contribute and you want to participate in those conversations and do something. This work is anti-racist, and this was in response to the conversations that were in all parts of the country after the murder of George Floyd. I am a researcher, I am a lung cancer patient advocate, and I cannot just focus on the blank lung cancer care and advocacy when there is actually, again, some people are getting the advantages and others are not. So as an anti-racist work, I had to put the emphasis on where the emphasis needed to be put, which is, again, the disparity that has to do with the systemic racism, with the problems that we have in the healthcare system that is often by design comes to serve groups that have the wealthy, the white majority, and leave behind the groups that are not accessing the opportunities and the advances in treatment and science, the advances that science bring. I'm only alive because I take targeted therapy. The medicine I'm on was approved in 2017. Only alive because the genetic mutation that caused my illness was found in 2007 or 8, and then the testing became widely available. More widely available if you fit particular phenotype, less available if you don't. And this is a problem, and we need to call it out. That's why Project Radical is here. And that's why I'm very grateful and honored, actually, to be part of this group of people who are doing amazing work to move the needle. And this is very important. This is not just a group that we meet and talk to talk. The goal is to move the needle, is to leave impact, is to change the face of lung cancer care, to bring more emphasis on the disparities that are plaguing the care that we have in this country. So let's start. That goal is to have a conversation. So I'm really excited to hear about everyone. And by conversation, we mean both reflective and generative conversation. So you're going to be sharing some, and with that, again, we come to synthesize and develop our ideas about this project to share it with a broader audience. But also it's generative in the sense, as we're coming together to talk and reflect about this, we are hopefully coming up with more ideas or stimulating others to think about more ideas so we can join all forces to make an impact. Let's start with Project Radical. We call it Project Radical with all cap Radical. racial equity in cancer of the lung. I remember when we had that conversation that led to developing the name. I'd like to hear that. I give the credit to Dante and Maisha. Primarily, they were, I think, behind the scene working and playing with some names and putting the letters around until this word come. Do you mind sharing this anecdote and story, Dante and Maisha? Where I want to start first.
Well, I can share it first, considering it was mainly Maisha, because we're basically tossing back acronyms via email in a couple of meetings. And I think I came up with something horrible, but after that, radical formed out of it. But then I kind of thought of the naming behind it, but it was basically Maisha's work. But as part of the naming group, we were trying to come up with this acronym, and you were submitting for a study at the time. And what led us down that path is we wanted to sound, extreme and focused on the meaningful change that we were trying to create. And then the radical acronym came up, and then Dr. Maisha and her brilliance, she kind of came up with that after I thought radical sounded like a kind of surfer old thing, but the meaning behind it, the acronym, what it stands for, was great. So she played a bigger role in that than I did. So I'll let her kind of tell the story.
Well, no, Dante, I think Dante Morehoff, I think everyone is just in terms of, I think of radical being, and not so much of a rebel, but I think when I was thinking of radical, I was thinking of something novel, innovative. Again, I'm thinking of putting on my grantsmanship here and understanding when you're thinking of something that's not traditionally done, right? Not traditionally bought into that space in the sphere of what I think Chris identified, of something that's not really in the mainstream. And again, we're not talking about just disparate health outcomes or disparate population, although we know that they are mostly impacted, but we're talking about that face, of what cancer is, what lung cancer is, who's being disproportionately impacted by this. And we need to have a radical approach, an approach that's not traditionally set in, hey, let's put, a slogan or a normal saying just behind something. This is not normal, what's happening about lung cancer. And as Matthew talked about, this is something that needs to have a radical backing behind it. People aren't really knowing about lung cancer until they're brought into the ER, the late stage. And unfortunately, we think and we say, wow, how could we? How could we have missed some of these things? I know personally, I can attest, being a cancer, researcher, how could I have missed this in my spouse? How could I have not seen this? But not knowing and understanding the whole, gamut of research behind that and the treatment and the symptoms that occur. And meaning, again, there are several processes that go into this, but we need a radical approach, something that's not following behind that traditional stands. And so I'm, along with Dr. Morehoff, Chris, Nick, and Eugene, and everyone else here, we are having a radical stance, an innovative, a novel approach that we need to go about and getting this information out to not just those who are like minds in cancer research field and disparities field, but beyond our particular area and our expertise. We need to send this out in an approach that we need to go beyond the traditional ways of getting it out there.
Thank you, Dante and Maisha. To give a little more background, that was throughout, as Dante was alluding, throughout the process of writing a grant proposal. So we were doing a work group focusing on a project. And that's very important when you're bringing group together, is to work on something, because in the end, you want to lead to a product. You want to make a change and through something else. We debated, is radical too radical in a sense? Is it too extreme? We're sending this funding call for the NIH. Actually, we sent it R21 and it got scored in a sense better than 50%. It got scored about 42, I think 48 percentile. So better than 50% got reviewed, got really great feedback. We're going to resubmit again in the next cycle. So, but is it too radical to use those words? And we made the decision that no, it is not. The problem is so pervasive, so disturbing, that you cannot shy away, and you need those approaches. You need to name it, you need to call it what it is in order for us to actually start impacting change. I want to get input from others as well. So this is how the idea developed. But what does Project Radical mean to you? I want to get from every person who wants to add to this. What does Project Radical mean to you actually? Why is this radical? What makes this work radical for you, again, in the space of lung cancer equity in the face of addressing the injustices that are taking place? Eugene, Chris, Nick, or Matthew?
I'll start with that, Morav. I mean, just basically going off of what Maisha said is that the unfortunate nature of lung cancer is to be radical right now is to actually say that prevention is not enough. When we look at cancer across the board, they don't just focus purely on prevention of getting people to stop smoking. And so the lung cancer community, rather than just acknowledge that the historic goal really only talked about that, we haven't just accepted it so that we can say we have to take a radical approach of saying that survivorship can be the goal. And that seems crazy to think that that's radical, but it's true. We have to be radical in doing that. The idea that research matters. Well, yes, it does. And it's been clear in other cancers that research does matter, but lung cancer has not made it clear that it does. And so we have to be radical in our just obvious nature of saying that it does matter. With treatments, you talked about your access, so biomarker testing, new therapies that are absolutely changing the face of lung cancer. I mean, to look at you, there's no way someone would think you're a lung cancer survivor, but more, they wouldn't think you're a cancer survivor. So there's been radical change as it relates to therapies that make it where somebody can continue living, continue working, and we need to celebrate that. If someone is an ALK positive, I know we'll get to that when we talk about biomarker testing, but ALK positive, the first drugs, Alkori, was approved 10 years ago. Right? And you got people that are dramatically changed in terms of their life because of it. So we need to celebrate that, and not just, again, celebrate that radical change happened like that it was, but that we can really celebrate it. Also, lung cancer screening, the National Lung Cancer Screening Trial was approved 10 years ago. Dang, radically celebrate it. So I think that's what's exciting about this project is that, again, unfortunately, when we look at the Black community, there's always been disparities. But if we can take a radical approach to getting to the Black community, it's going to help everybody, because at the end of the day, it's really about us first asserting the things that we know work, the things that we know have to happen if we want to take care of people across the board. And then always as it relates to Black people, it's just making sure those things get to those communities, doing that little bit more, having those other conversations, making those other relationships. And we know it can happen because we've seen it in other places, but it takes hard work, it takes commitment to get it done.
I love what you said, Chris. The landscape of care for lung cancer has changed radically in the past 5-10 years, and making that available to everybody is a must. Nick, Eugene, and Matthew, would like to add anything?
I was just going to build on what Chris was saying, that in some ways the word radical appeals to me because there's been so many changes, but there's been so many changes that need to occur. It seems stunning to me that some of the research you're doing, me and you are doing, Mohav, showing how many months people have symptoms of lung cancer before they're diagnosed. 4, 5, 6 months, 9 months. I mean, it seems like someone should have looked at this maybe a few hundred years ago, at least a few years ago, not in 2021. So I think we need to be radical in thinking, I wouldn't say outside the box, but let's kind of get outside the big cancer centers and their big footprints to, just honestly talking to people and caregivers who've experienced cancer themselves or their loved ones. They saw the changes. And why isn't us researchers and clinicians taking so many years to catch up with what people have been telling us? So that's why I think this is radical.
bringing it back to the community. I think that's who we are. I am here, or my connection to lung cancer and to this work is because I'm patient first. That's where I developed my curiosity for the work for lung cancer, for people who are surviving like me, and then for people who are not surviving like me. So that's Maisha, Chris, we're all part of this. We have lung cancer in our families. And there are many people. Lung cancer is so prevalent that you almost never meet somebody in the street without them saying, hey, my father, my grandfather, or this or that person have developed lung cancer or died from it, or benefit or did not benefit. The health system is so complex, and bringing it back to the work to the communities to lead this work. Disparity, you can address disparity by doing work in big research institutes, but really, if you want to address it, you give the lead to the community. You follow the communities, and that's what the hope here is, to have this initiative built on foundations of engaging, of involving, of keeping people from the communities who are dealing with those issues first. Nick and Eugene, if you have anything else to add, or we can move to another question. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I would just add, to push the radical even farther. I think one of the things that that stands out for me, Morhaf, you talked about kind of the impetus for this project is that we are specifically articulating that we are anti-racist. And one of the things I think that we have wrestled with as a country and that we have learned is that the passivity and the ambivalence that historically has happened is no longer good enough. So when we talk about improving access to clinical trials, and we talk about improving access to lung cancer screening, we also have to recognize outright the history of disparity that exists. We aren't creating anything in a vacuum. We are starting behind, right? The disparities are already a part of our day-to-day reality in terms of caring for lung cancer. And so the radical thing is not just to say we're going to fight against this, but recognizing that we have inherited this problem. This problem is here now, and we can't just start from scratch and assume that whatever we build is going to overcome this problem. We have to understand that the reality is access to lung cancer screening. Yes, lung cancer screening saves lives, but not everyone in our country has access to insurance that's going to pay for lung cancer screening. So we can't just say, do lung cancer screening and that's going to solve the disparities problem. We have to recognize that there are other things at the intersection of this problem that has to be addressed. And I think that's also part of what makes this work radical.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, naming it and calling it what it is definitely very important. Eugene?
I think, we sort of gloss over problems that are local and then structural and systemic, but they carry through to make disparities that start early, carry through the whole research and training spectrum. So, very few kids get out of the inner city. They never see scientists. They go through, and then those that get to college, as you go further up, it gets emptier and emptier. And then you have this void of people, and then you say you go do a research program or do medical school. Well, it gets emptier and emptier. And then if you try to bring up issues, it's always pushback. And so you're always aware of the things that happen, but you just can't get other people to buy in. And so the question is, do you try to change the system, or do you just get to a point where you are in a position to try to impact change? And so in this sort of carries through when we look at the rates of Blacks that get lung cancer and their mortality versus who are actually getting access to those larger clinical trials. And those big trials still only have 3% Black people. And so how are you really creating therapies systemically if you aren't even getting the patients that have the worst outcome? And so we almost have to start mandating that you're not going to bring your trial numbers up, because you shouldn't wait till you get to post-market to say, oh, well, we might see this person. It's like, well, why aren't we doing this sooner? But that also means you need a workforce that actually reflects the populations you're treating. And we know med school and academic research does not reflect the communities remotely. And so you almost have to force some change to actually get more people to actually understand issues that minorities face, and we just don't have it right now.
I think, yeah, that's great. Just to add to that, Eugene, I think that's great segue into being a multi-tiered approach, right? And so we're understanding that from the researcher's perspective, hey, hey, this is what we need to do. And as we talked about the community's perspective, and depending upon what you're talking about as community, right? What is community, right? And so if you're talking about those who are impacted disproportionately from lung cancer, be it African Americans or Black, diaspora, women, those non-smokers, that it's all. So we have to look at making it a priority in that population as well. So how do we prioritize, lung cancer in these communities that are impacted with a multitude of experiences? So from that community engagement hat that I'm putting on, that's where I'm looking at how do I make this a priority for individuals prior to, right, public health professional, prior to it even coming to that way where I'm, a year or 6 months in advance, someone's getting symptoms, and then you have to go into that. So we have to make it a priority to know about health and to understand that being healthy is okay on top of, and I'll bring in my social determinants, housing, transportation, education, on top of trauma, on top of all of these things. And how do we prioritize all of this within that scope? And so that's where I am looking at in terms of infusing some of that, community aspects of understanding and how to engage the community historically, understanding in terms of systemically, how historically they've been excluded from research. They've been excluded from being at the table, even at the door, to even talk about it. So how do we rectify all of that, Nick, right? How do we rectify all of that, dismantle, and then build back up? Hey, this is, we're trustworthy. This is what's happening, and so understanding that it's a process, we can present the information, you can present it at someone's door, but they'll walk right around it or walk right over it. So how do we get people to pick it up and engage? And so I know one thing that we're doing, several things that we're doing in terms of workforce development, as Eugene talked about, and curriculum development at Morehouse School of Medicine, and leadership development in terms of those who are BIPOC communities, in terms of informing individuals about policy development, policy funding, going into some of these aspects of research, along with developing curricula for medical school students who are of diverse and more information and radical in their thinking, and saying, hey, before we even get to see someone who is late stage cancer, lung cancer, let's do some preemptive things, and kind of develop some curriculum thing and understanding, hey, how do we understand and about marketing and lung cancer and smoking, not just smoking cigarettes, but how do we talk about some messaging and be an advocate as a clinician, as a public health practitioner? So those are things that we are looking at developing at Morehouse School of Medicine. But then also, as I mentioned, as a community engagement and informant, I am personally at stake when I'm talking about it. Could be me. It was my husband. It could be my father. And these are things that I know that will be committed. So when we take it into the community, let's go into churches to talk about clinical trials and the value of that, not at the late stage, but the value of talking to this. And I'm, creating, spots where you can talk about this in churches. You can talk about this in barbershops. You can talk about this in beauty salons. These are things that we need to make sure that we have that foundation there. So it is infused in everyday language about health and being, health is wealth. And so staying connected to the community is key for researchers, I think, which is also something we need to improve upon. And we're here to do that at Project Radical.
Thank you. And that takes me actually really nicely to a couple of topics that I would do one before the other. When we say Project Radical, what are we doing here? What are some of the activities? And I can share some from my perspective as a member of the team and some of the activities that I participated in. And I would love to hear from others as well, some reflections about the work that we have done in the past year. We started in November of 2020. We raised raised about 14,000, and then we come together. We used our connections in the lung cancer community to bring this group together. And we met every other week, every Monday at noon, and we had conversations about just like the ones that we're having now. Actually, this is very typical to the kind of conversations that we have every week, and they're always energizing and exciting because we build on each other's energy and passion and sense of justice. That's why I love this group, and it's always enriching. We had a focus on, as I said, project building, a grant proposal to bring some funding to explore disparity as it affects the diagnosis of lung cancer. So people from symptom to diagnosis of lung cancer. What happened? African American community. What happens for the person? Where are some of the pitfalls? Some of the experiences that are inappropriate, or some of that are suboptimal, that are potentially leading to worse outcome. We developed that grant proposal, and we started doing a pilot work for that project. So we knew, and as I speak here as a cancer survivor myself, you can't wait for the funding to come. You might have to do the work on your own, finding ways around it. So we started doing that pilot study. At least if you say, hey, we got the funding, this is a pilot work. If we don't get the funding, we're going to have to do something and move on to the next, so we can build on the momentum. So we started doing the interviews. We've interviewed about 18 members, patients, caregivers, and researchers, community advocates, to understand actually where are the pain points in the experience of diagnosis. That's one of the projects, I guess, that you can call underneath the umbrella of Project Radical. We also we launched a fundraise. I will share the link after that by email to everyone. I will include that as well. Share that we're raising fund to continue to do that work. We want to look at the whole span of the experiences from diagnosis to treatment and survivorship as well. Because again, it's not enough. Once you get the diagnosis, that's the start of a journey. And along that journey, there are many things that could go wrong. So we want to understand what actually takes place and where are, again, the pain points in that area. In the meetings we planned this same activity, this series of webinars in November. We had been planning them since, I would say, since June of this year. And we want it to be a space for raising awareness. So we want the audience not just to be not academic necessarily only. We want the academics, we want their ears, we want the primary care doctors, we want the oncologists, but also we want the community members. We want individuals who are actually could have developed or may at some point develop. Any person with a lung can get lung cancer. So any person needs to hear about those. And any person has a role in addressing this disparity. Again, this is, as Nick said, this is an anti-racist work. Part of being anti-racist is you find the spaces where racism is playing part, where disparities, where the injustices, where the prejudices are leaving its mark, and you try to leave an impact. And this is, health disparity is a big one, because, and it is, I would argue, it is one of the more important ones, because health means you live or you don't live, and there's really nothing more important than that. So that's as foundational as it can be. These are some of the activities. We're not just a research group. We're not just education group. I consider some of our work in the space of activism as well, and advocacy. And we're, as you can see from the conversation, every person bring their own lens. Eugene, for example, in the workforce development, making sure that the researchers, the future researchers in the space of lung cancer are representative, they look like the communities that are researching. This is very, very important. As Maisha also said, engaging the community, bringing the voice of the person who is living that experience. So we come up with multiple complementary perspectives to do this work. This is how I see it from my perspective. Others share more about what we do. What is Project Radical? What are we doing here? If I miss anything, or if there's something else that, and I know actually I would like to add that everyone, and this is the beauty of this work and this group, that every person on their own is doing a lot of work that come to complement or come to add or expand or push the limits in different spaces. I'll invite, for example, Chris to share about the White Ribbon project that he's pioneering, he's leading, and Nick also just shared before coming to the meeting today how they're actually participating in Chris' project. And there's a lot of other initiatives that are taking place outside Project Radical, but also can come as an extension to this. So I'd like to invite others to share.
Well, Morafa, as you were talking about the White Ribbon Project, so much of that, it was started by Heidi Pieranda. Heidi was a lung cancer survivor in Denver, and her husband is a primary care doctor and also a caregiver. And for Heidi, again, we're talking about kind of health disparities here, but within lung cancer, across the board, there's a disparity as it relates to other cancers. And so last year at this time, or actually September of 2020, she was disappointed with the lack of a plan of the local cancer centers in terms of what they were doing for Lung Cancer Awareness Month. So she asked her husband to make a white ribbon that she could put up on her door and really not apologize for advocating and letting people know about lung cancer. And I think that's what we have to do. I think that's, it is radical, unfortunately, that to be unapologetic about the things that we need. And I think that's probably the core of Project Radical is making it very clear, as you said, that we have to speak it, we have to say it. What do we need? What do we want? And then go fight for it. So, but we have to make it plain, otherwise we're not going to get it done. And like I've said before, in too many cases, the goals of lung cancer have been screamed out that just get people to stop smoking. And it's so much more than that. And if we're not, as parts of this community, if we don't demand that we say more than that, we don't demand that we do more than that, then it won't change. It won't change. And so again, that radical approach that you talked about is critical, and that's why you've got a diverse group of people together, because it's not just one particular group, but really it's the whole community. It's the whole culture that has to change. And if you don't see that, if you don't accept that, then it'll seem like, why is it not changing fast enough? Well, it's because one person can't get it done. I mean, with my connections with the NFL, right up to the commission of the NFL, that is absolutely not enough to change the lung cancer community. It requires a whole team of people from a bunch of different areas to get it done. And to ignore that or try to dance around that is to not be successful, but to embrace that, which is what's happening here, is to recognize that this is what it takes.
Thank you, Chris. Others would like to shed lights on ongoing work that they're part of that could be to expand on the Project Radical or be part of.
Well, I think it's key to actually, in terms of getting the message beyond, not just as Matthew talked about, but not be inside the box, but switching it up and playing around in the box. And to me, I think that's very key in terms of expanding the message. Where looking at social media, and I know that some people have podcasts, which is it's a growing, in terms of messaging platform, resurging as well. And I can talk about my husband's podcast throughout his diagnosis and his treatment. He talked about it via a podcast entitled "Folks, I Got Something to Say." And so we'll continue that. There's a resurgence of some of his podcast. Who will continue that is my son, Kareem, who will lead that podcast. And so we're going to continue to talk about lung cancer, but impacts on survivorship with children as well and family members. So we're going to continue to get the word out to the community, to networks, to researchers, along with, other platforms and other spaces that are out there that we traditionally don't think about. Again, that's part of being radical, right? That's continuing the efforts that we need to get into, and we need to just expound upon our message.
And I think this is something I should have done in the beginning,
Yes,
but I want to
yes.
share about the other team members that were not able to join us today, but they will be throughout this work. And as I do that, you will see some of the work that is taking place. Dawood, for example, is a health disparity researcher, and he's doing wonderful work mentoring actually and helping future researchers develop the capacity to write grants, to do research, learn methodology. Casey is a researcher as well at UW, social worker, and was source of done a lot of work together, qualitative, in the project that looked at the experiences of lung cancer patient. Tanika was the research assistant who helped with analyzing the data from the interview. Noemi, she's a researcher as well, and she's a cancer patient herself. She will be participating in the conversation. Opal from Longevity as well, doing beautiful work, helping us with the fundraising, with ideas, with organizing, with bringing the group together. Shirese as well. She's a cancer researcher, and she will be also hopefully on the panel as well. Farhood, he's a thoracic surgeon, and hopefully he will be joining us on the panel talking about the treatment that are available for the lung cancer patient today, especially with early stages at time of diagnosis. Shay is the person that came to mind when you were talking about the podcast. She was beautiful and one of the best interviewers that I've actually met in my life, and very thoughtful at asking questions. And she has helped us with interviewing some of us here and sharing the message and raising awareness. So I want to say thank you to everyone who's not able to be with us today, and hopefully you will get to see them throughout. And that tells about some of the work that's being done by the team from here. I want to go back to a notion or to themes that Nick started talking about, the opportunities today, the context. Why is this important to do this work today? What are the opportunities that you see in the landscape? Again, not just in the lung cancer. Of course, this is Lung Cancer Awareness Month, so we timed it to raise awareness about this topic during this month. So there's that. I can share more about it. But there's also some conversations about racism, about health disparity, about workforce development. Can you let's elaborate a little bit more, because that will take us then to end about the next activities and other things that we can do. Maybe let's do 2 or 3 minutes on this subject so we can move to the next one. Why is this important today? What are some of the opportunities that we can work on?
Okay, well, I guess I can go then. It's important to do it today, as we, in my opinion, we have the attention of a lot of ears, particularly, for example, as we do things in a virtual environment. It's harder for people to get out. A lot of people have access to the internet, and as we all know, as what I do is community engagement, and we want the community to be very, very aware. So why not bring ourselves to the community and to address that perspective? And I think that, as we engage in these perspectives, what you're going to see in the upcoming weeks is the opportunity to bring multiple different stories and perspectives together to paint one big picture. And that is going to help us in what so many people have said to be radical. It's kind of alluding to what Chris was kind of saying, that it's so much more than just stop smoking. We want to, if it's real, then it's radical. And part of changing culture is to bring all these stories and perspectives together. And what better way to do that through a series like this? And there's so many stories to tell, so many more powerful things to address. We've heard about the intersectionality of Morhoff being a patient and a researcher. We've heard about Chris's story. We've heard about Maisha's story. And stories on large platforms really make a difference. It's so much more than just bringing the data available. There's stories behind the data. I want to know the stories behind the data. I want to know about Chris's wife, because there are more stories out there. I want to know about Maisha's husband, because there are people out there that we can touch. And there's never been a time like the present when everybody is tuned in and when everybody is engaged, so that now we can make radical changes. And we can do this on different platforms. For example, we were mentioning the podcasting, the social media, and in a virtual event. And so we are here to bring you these stories, and not just facts to say, hey, stop smoking, here's the numbers, here are the percentages. We can give you the meaning and the context behind the data told through storytelling as well, which is really important because there's somebody out there who does not want anything like what happened to Chris's wife or Maisha's husband to happen to them as well. And so that's the context that we are working in, and we are at a position to where we can share these stories, and we have the attention of everybody now, and specifically in the climate that this country is going through now when it comes to race and anti-racism and things of that nature. So it's very important that we're doing this work. And so that's the perspective that I bring from it.
Thank you, Dante.
Mm-hmm.
I want to end with a question, but maybe if any from the audience have questions, maybe feel free to raise your hand, and we give you the floor. But until I see someone raising their hand, maybe I can ask my question there. How can people participate? How can people join? Chris?
Marab, are you asking how can they join the movement, or how can they
Yes.
join Project Radical?
The movement, which I consider Project Radical.
Can I ask that question? And I'm asking that question. Yeah. So I'm asking that question. That's also as really kind of going back to what you asked before. I said, why is the time right now? Well, because when you talk about that there's cancer disparities, I mean, we can talk about it from a research perspective, and sometimes that can elevate flat out people. So if we're saying that there's, Nick is talking about access to lung cancer screening, it says that there are people that could be cured that are not being cured because of the lack of access. We talk about possibly not biomarker testing. There are people that could look like you that could benefit from the drugs that you're on that are not getting that. And so this is Lung Cancer Awareness Month, so it makes it where this conversation is possibly bigger because it's Lung Cancer Awareness Month. But Lung Cancer Awareness is so much bigger than any month. It's a conversation about each day, because each day there are people in 6 people average that are going to be diagnosed with lung cancer. And on that day, they need to know that they are not alone. They need to know that they can count on the people right in front of them, that they are going to make sure whenever we have that research has shown to work, that you have people that are going to fight for you. And so I just wanted to rewind and say that that's what the White Ribbon Project, that's what the core of the White Ribbon Project is about, is recognizing that these are people. This discussion is about people whose lives matter, right? And we can say that, but we have to urgency like crazy, attacking this thing and making sure that if there's any way that we can get, that people can be better, we are going to fight for that.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Yes, we are going to fight for that.
Well, I would also add that to get involved, also, you can also donate. I think that's it. That's also an important perspective. There are causes around this country for cancer. We donate to a lot of things. And I think that to support work that is going to cure and reduce disparities in cancer is important. I'm a supporter of a lot of good causes, and donating to reduce disparities for lung cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer. Those things are important. I mean, just to be crystal clear, because I believe in transparency. I mean, I spent $30 on DoorDash for Subway yesterday. I could have donated that $30 to something else. Skip a day of going out to Subway and put it towards a donation for cancer. That's not going to kill anybody. I mean, why not? You can eat at home one day. So what I'm trying to say is there are certain causes that are worth fighting for. And as Chris put it bluntly, these lives matter. And so you can do your part, no matter how large or how small. The point is that you're doing something. So I think that if you can take some time maybe to donate, or maybe just to research or help out or ask questions, or connect with other individuals who are like-minded and take a stance or do the work, just start there. And that's a great way to get started. It's all about being radical. And so that would be my 2 cents on it, is to probably donate or take action.
And share the word. So this same conversation will be available on YouTube, on Facebook, other social media. Just you don't have to hit like, you just share. That's that's what we're asking everybody. So, and we'll be appreciative of every person who helped us spread the word. I want to be mindful to stay on time, and I will see you all on Thursday. Same time will be a conversation for another hour as well. I want to say thank you for panel members, for Project Radical team, for starting this conversation today, and thank you also for everyone who logged in to listen to us, and for everyone who will go out and spread the word. Thank you.